What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Friday, June 13th, 2025, with a breaking news episode of the Ducks Dish podcast as 2026 four-star wide receiver Messiah Hampton has committed to Oregon. Big pickup for Dan Lanning, Ross Douglas, and the rest of the Ducks. And joining me to break it all down is ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. J-Hop, how are you?
Well, there is one thing that remains undefeated in recruiting, and it's not just girlfriends. It's J-Hop going to Mexico and Oregon getting commits. So the streak stays alive. But as you can see, I'm not in the US of A. I am visiting Mexico and have a lovely view behind me. And I'm excited that I get to take a little bit of time out of my day to come and break this down with you, Max, because it makes it all worth it. And I know folks are excited.
Folks are super excited. I think after obviously the ups and downs with the Richard Wesley commitment and then decommitment, I think that Oregon fans were fiending for some good news. And we've been telling our subscribers over there at ScoopDuck that Messiah Hampton is one of those guys that you've got to keep an eye on here in the 2026 class. So we're going to break this down and then maybe get into a little bit of what's next. And just a quick little disclaimer, Justin looks like he's, connected well right now, and we're rocking and rolling with it. But we'll see if the connection can hold steady for us, and then we can get you guys a good episode.
I'm on Mexico time and I'm on Mexico Wi-Fi, so just so you know, it's not ultra reliable.
Well, yeah, we'll rock with it and just give you guys the best episode that we can here. Let me go ahead and pull up some tape of Oregon's newest commit here and their first wide receiver commit in the 2026 class. Just a couple notables here with Messiah Hampton, listed at 6'1", 180, 190 pounds, kind of in that range. He is rated a four-star recruit by On3, the number 48 player in the On300 rankings, number 7 wideout, and the number 1 wide receiver in the Empire State, which we know, of course, is New York. And, man, this is a huge commitment for Oregon, Justin, not just because they've kind of been starving for commits a little bit, it feels like, here in the 2026 class, but because I think Ross Douglas really kind of tabbed this as his must-get guy in the 2026 class. I feel like it's been said over and over again, but he was the first player that he offered once he joined Dan Lanning's staff. Obviously had those ties in the state of New York from his time at Syracuse, and the Ducks were able to beat out Syracuse, Miami, and a couple of other big-time programs. Penn State was another one he took in OV2, so just all in all, a really big get for Oregon and going across the country to get another blue chipper.
Yeah, putting aside the commitment alone, which is big for Oregon and Oregon fans, this is really big for Ross Douglas. This was his first real shot, right? This is the guy, he showed up, offered right away, and made it clear that he was going to prioritize at Oregon. And since, you give Coach Douglas a lot of credit, since Hampton has just moved up in the rankings. He's done nothing but rise steadily in the rankings. So this isn't like, some 3-star or whatever. This is a guy that he saw and said, hey, this is a really good football player. We need to get after him. Got him an offer and never let up. So again, it's nice to kind of break the streak or the dry spell or whatever you want to call it. Is a really good player, a really nice get for Ross Douglas, and in my opinion, sets him up really well for the rest of wide receiver recruiting in 2026. Don't think they need a ton of bodies here, but I think you're looking for 2 to 4 guys, probably closest to 3 being the real number. Now you've got one in the fold. Now you just go chop wood on a couple others. And Hampton's a great one. I think he's just a great all-around receiver. I appreciate QB11 for the eval. We were able to post on ScoopDuck about him. Fluid runner, a lot of, just a great mover. Is a guy that doesn't struggle catching the ball. So just really love this addition. Love to see, Coach Douglas flex his muscles on the recruiting trail and love to break that dry spell.
Yeah, and I want to break down a little bit more about what this commitment, I think, means for Douglas and Oregon on the recruiting trail. We know some of the other names that Oregon's been recruiting here in the 2026 cycle. Your Chris Henry, Caden Dixon-Wyatt. Obviously, those guys are both committed to Ohio State right now. I think the thing to keep in perspective here, Justin, is the timing of the Douglas hire, and I think that has kind of lent itself to some of the results that we've seen on the recruiting trail. We already knew who Oregon's top wide receiver targets were when he got hired, but he didn't necessarily have a relationship with some of those guys. So you're kind of starting from behind the eight ball in that regard. But one of the guys he did have a relationship was with Messiah Hampton. So I think that obviously you'd like to see Oregon, Chris Henry was always a long shot. Caden Dixon-Wyatt felt like he was more in the wheelhouse and a little bit more realistic, but at the end of the day, you're still going against Ohio State for one of the best wide receivers in the country. So I think that you kind of have to take it all in perspective with Ross Douglas as it pertains to the connections that he had when he got hired. Oregon hasn't really recruited the Northeast at a super high clip. And obviously, that's another corner of the country. So you have to overcome distance there. They did it with Messiah Hampton, getting him on campus multiple times for visits. And here they are in mid-June, early June, capitalizing with a commitment.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there, Max, that probably is a little bit overlooked. Yeah, Chris Henry Jr., I think you and I both felt like, yeah, there's some real smoke there, but that was going to be a tough one, right? I mean, it's Ohio State. You can't fault a kid for going to play wide receiver at Ohio State. They churn them out with the absolute best of them. So, sometimes these recruitments just make sense. Like you said, Caden Dixon-Wyatt, you do wonder if Junior Adams would not have left for the Dallas Cowboys job. Maybe that recruitment plays out a little bit differently. I don't know, but quite possibly. Not really Ross Douglas's fault, because while he's at Syracuse, he's not recruiting KDW. He's not recruiting Chris Henry Jr. So he had to come and start those relationships late and try to catch up. And again, you're talking about another kid that committed to Ohio State that plays wide receiver. Can't fault either of those young men for going to play for the Buckeyes at that position.
And I really like the tape that we're seeing here from Messiah Hampton. Obviously, he's a really gifted receiver, can catch the ball, make plays after he catches the ball. I think that's something that's uber valuable in today's era of college football. You need a guy with good hands, but you don't want someone that can only catch the ball and then not do anything with it after. This dude flashes tons of ability, whether we're talking about the screen pass, as you see here on the tunnel screen, or even in the return game as a specialist. So I think that certainly adds to the value of this commitment for Ross Douglas at the wide receiver position. And I think the more you look at it, the more you have more stuff you see to like with Messiah Hampton. I mean, he was someone that I got to interview a couple times throughout his process. Super grateful and gracious, just humble dude. I think he comes to Oregon with a chip on his shoulder because he is from New York. I think that people always know about New York and just the grandiose of it as a state, the media market and all that, but they don't really get a lot of pub, I feel like, compared to a lot of major high school football markets or major high school football states. So I think he's going to get to Eugene, looking to prove that guys from New York can hang there with the best of them. He was the Buffalo Bills representative for the Nike Next Ones, which was essentially like kind of each NFL team choosing one of the best players in their area to represent them. So I think that you just see a whole lot to like about this Messiah Hampton commitment.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of the the little things. Obviously, the blocking is a big thing when you start talking about a receiver. At this point, these guys should be able to catch and run, but are they doing a lot of the little things? You can see on Hampton's film, if you're watching it on YouTube, you can see his film. He was playing defense there for a while, playing some safety, playing some corner. So this is a guy that can play both ways, isn't just a wide receiver diva, if you will. And like you said, I think the chip on the shoulder is the right way to say it. Coming from New York, it's kind of a tough, a little bit tougher state to get out there and get noticed. Not super popular in terms of football players year in and year out. So, for a guy like Hampton to be able to go to Oregon and kind of showcase, what those guys are able to do out there will be big. And he's going to excel in that offense. He seems like just a terrific fit for the offense for Will Stein and what Oregon likes to do. And I'm fired up. I think it's a great pickup. I'm not just trying to sugarcoat anything. It just seems like a great all-around pickup. And it's truly exciting for you and I to be able to be doing one of these podcasts.
It is. I mean, they haven't had a commitment that stuck since February when Xavier Larice committed. And I guess we have to use the phrase stuck very cautiously here, as we know that we have a long way to go until the early signing period in December. Other thing with Messiah Hampton, Rochester, New York, James Monroe High School. The Ducks did land Seven McGee out of Rochester. back in the 2021 class, I want to say. And he was a guy that a lot of fans were excited about. Didn't quite work out at Oregon, but he certainly flashed some ability while he was with the Ducks in Eugene. You kind of got into it there a little bit, Justin, with kind of where Oregon's at the wide receiver position now. The first wide receiver commitment in the class moves Oregon to the number 8 class in the On3 team industry rankings for 2026. What do you think is next year at the position for Ross Douglas?
Yeah, kind of rewinding back, I think you're looking at, 2 to 4 receivers in this class. Probably the real number's 3, right? You probably want 3 receivers. We've already talked about them, but I'll bring them up again. Chris Henry Jr., Caden Dixon-Wyatt. Right now, I will totally label them long shots to flip to Oregon, right? But it's June, okay? Just let this thing play out. I guarantee Oregon's maintaining communication with them, whether it's once a week or multiple times a week. I guarantee Oregon's maintaining communication there and just hoping to see, if things remain the same down the line. Again, I'm not sitting here telling you they're flipping, not even remotely the case, but we got to keep eyes there. I think the 2 that I'll mention, and I'm going to guess you're probably going to agree with me, is Jalen Lott being one. There's been a lot of talk about Oregon with Jalen Lott, kind of an athlete, been a corner, been a wide receiver. I think different teams see him different ways. Looks like he wants to play on offense, preferably at wide receiver. So Oregon, Texas, USC, all mentioned there. Feels like the Ducks are in on that one pretty good. Second one I'll mention is Calvin Russell. Oregon's definitely up the ante with 4-star, almost borderline 5-star, I believe, wide receiver Calvin Russell. Has visited Oregon, and it looks like the Ducks are kind of trying to quietly make a move there. At the end of the day, if Ross Douglas is able to basically, put Hampton, Lott, and Calvin Russell in the boat, and those are the only 3 he signs, that's a terrific class for Oregon. You take that all day long. And again, assuming he does that, I would imagine he remains open to communication with KDW and Chris Henry Jr. after that. Probably A, not room to take both, and B, you're probably not really ever going to face that problem in the first place, but you just keep open communication and maybe just keep taking a swing at Chris Henry Jr., quite possibly.
Yeah, those are the names to watch. You nailed it there, Justin. So I don't want to get too redundant, but Jalen Lott is taking his official visit to Texas this weekend. He is a Texas legacy. I know that is something that is factoring into this recruitment as far as just what his dad did at UT. But I think that Oregon can try to lean into the, hey, come be different, come kind of blaze your own trail, do your own thing. That was very much the pitch for another gifted Texas wide receiver in DeCorian Moore that the Ducks were able to snag over UT in the final hours there. So I think my gut's kind of telling me that Texas is in a really good spot there right now, Justin, just for my thoughts. But I mean, Oregon's going to get him for an official visit as of right now. Next weekend looks like the weekend that he'll be in town. And I think he's trying to commit around July 4th, July 5th, earlier on in the month there. So that one is an Oregon versus Texas battle. And I'm not ruling Oregon out. I just know I'm hearing tons of Texas smoke around that one. So just wanted to bring that to the table. And then Calvin Russell, he seems like a long shot because he is from Miami. He did win a state title last year with Teddy Bridgewater, former NFL QB, over there at Northwestern. But that is a guy that Ross Douglas did have a prior relationship with. And we know that Syracuse is another team to watch for Calvin Russell, who's also taken OVs to LSU and UNC. And he's already taken his OV to Oregon. So we're going to be watching that one really closely. I think he has a July 5th or 16th. We know it's July that Calvin Russell's coming off the board. So I think that Oregon could try to make a move there. I definitely feel better about having Lott in the class than Calvin Russell because we know what's happened with Florida wide receivers in the 2025 class. But that was kind of out of obviously Oregon's control. So you got some really good names to keep an eye on there, Justin. And I think Oregon's going to do all they can to land one of those 2 top remaining targets.
Yeah, no, I think you put a bow on that perfectly. You want to get at least one of those 2 guys that we were talking about in Lott or Russell. If you can manage to get both and keep Hampton in the boat, you got a really strong group there. And, you got to feel relatively confident, given what Ross Douglas has just done here with Hampton, that he's got a good shot at getting one of those guys at least, given what he's done here. So Yeah, just kind of keep tabs on that stuff. And like you said, both those guys, we'll probably we'll have a really good feeling, but we'll also know their decisions probably within about a month or so. So those recruitments are definitely winding down.
Oregon did also host 2026 wide receiver Larry Miles out of the state of Florida for a visit earlier this month, I believe. However, it didn't look like, at least I didn't see an offer come after that visit. So I'm not saying that things are, over between Oregon and Larry Miles, but that was kind of a newer name to watch. And because we didn't see an offer after that trip, maybe that, tells us a little bit about kind of how the staff kind of views him on their big board. But still, I think it could be a name worth keeping tabs on. The other thought that comes to mind for me, Justin, as we look at the 2026 class at the wide receiver spot in a pretty small group of targets, Oregon does also have Gatlin Bear from the 2024 recruiting class who will be joining the team for the 2026 season. At least that's what it's looking like as of right now. These mission trips can kind of create a little bit of I don't know if unease is the right word, but unknown. Just as far as if the guy is going to actually end up sticking to his school of choice before he started the mission trip. I will fully admit that I want to educate myself more on how those dynamics work. But that's just something I wanted to put out there because if you do see Oregon maybe take a little bit of a smaller group, you still have Gatlin Bear, like I just said. And then who knows what's happening with Evan Stewart if he misses time, if he wants to come back for another year or try his hand at the NFL draft.
Yeah, overall, if you take current wide receiver recruiting with the current roster and the expected addition of Gatlin Bear, you just don't need a lot of guys. Like you need a couple really good guys, fill out that room. We all know, DeCorian Moore hasn't even played an official first snap yet, right? So, you've got Cooper Perry is another guy that's getting a lot of pub as a true freshman. Jeremiah McClellan, some of those other guys, we're expecting them to kind of come in and take that next step as redshirt freshmen. So there's a lot of really good young talent at receiver on this roster. You don't need to sign 5 guys here. You just need 2 to 3 really good ones and put them with the other guys. Get Gatlin Bear on campus and roll. And Oregon's in great shape.
I got one more question I want us to kind of break down, Justin, before we get out of here on this episode. Just give me kind of your thoughts on where Oregon is at with the wide receiver position, because they're not an NFL factory at the position like Ohio State is. They don't have that elite track record that they can point to at the position. That's not to say that they won't at some point, but that is kind of the reality right now. You're not churning out first rounders every year like Ohio State is, but you're getting a little bit of momentum with Troy Franklin getting on the Broncos, and then Tez Johnson getting selected this year. So where do you kind of view Oregon recruiting right now for the wide receiver position specifically, because they're going after the best in the country?
Yeah, you're right. If we're just pinpointing development or past success, we'll call it checkered, right? They've had some guys, but it's not a year in and year out factory. It's not Ohio State. It's not LSU. They're on a different level than Oregon is if we're talking about wide receiver specifically. And it's okay to mention that. It's okay to say that. I think the addition and the development of Tez Johnson is probably something that they're going to lean heavily into as they continue moving forward. And I think you lean into the offense of Will Stein. He said over and over, I'm going to feed the studs. If you're a good enough player, you're going to get the ball. Tez Johnson had more than his share of catches, the last 2 seasons at Oregon. And I think they're going to go and sell that combination of things. Ball gets thrown a lot in Oregon's offense. It's not just a run offense. They do throw the ball a lot. And so, I think those are the things that you lean into more so, obviously, than your past success. And, that does work twofold in recruiting and in the transfer portal. I always feel that it does help when you take a transfer portal guy and he's there for multiple years for you to be able to sell that development versus a one and done kind of a stop. So I do think Oregon leaning into that.
Yeah, that's part of it too, that I think is kind of a hot button issue. Like, hey, can you sell guys that you brought in as transfers when you're making your recruiting pitch? And I think if you have them for multiple years, or if you at least drastically improve what was perceived as their draft stock, I think that that's something you can certainly hang your hat on as a coaching staff. But that's pretty much what I had, Justin. I know we were kind of trying to do a quicker episode today. But before we get out of here, is there anything else that you just wanted to touch on, whether it's what receiver specific or just Oregon recruiting right now?
No, not really. It's about 10 a.m. here, and I'm going to go start torpedoing buckets of beer. So anything that I tweet or post later, do not hold it against me because I'm in Mexico. And again, the streak remains undefeated. J-Hop in Mexico, commits happen. So will it be one or will there be more? I don't know, but I'm just going to stay here and ride this wave.
Yeah, you definitely have the commits while you're in Mexico trend going. I don't know if we have the commits while I go on camping trips going. The Ducks did get, Jordan Davison last year at this time when I was going on a camping trip, and I'm going on one again starting on Sunday. So we'll see what happens there, but there's definitely some more names to watch. Jet Washington, I think, is the guy that I'm tracking right now pretty heavily, but another big weekend on tap in Eugene with recruits coming. Ryder Lyons, 5-star quarterback, is the big one that you got to keep an eye on if you're a Duck fan. Commitment could happen at any time for him. So I think he's one that you definitely want to track here as we head into the weekend. But Justin, I'll leave you to it, man. Enjoy your time in Mexico. If you guys want to follow Justin, follow him at JHopkinsSD. Find me anywhere at Torres Sports. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck on 3 YouTube channel. And while you're at it, come subscribe to ScoopDuck.com. Join thousands of other Duck fans. Super active community, active message board. And Justin and I have you guys covered every step of the way. But until next time, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.